Labas. Good afternoon. We have the honor this afternoon for our last lecture to have Father Jonas Puodziunas. And from the attendance today, and very punctual attendance, yay, we know that this is one of our stars of the week. So you know him well. He's been preaching all week. He's a regular a number of summers now. And he has something very interesting to talk about, a whole new job change. So we are honored to have you, Father Puodziunas. Thank you.
Thank you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of all goodness, we thank you for the blessings of this day, for the blessings of this whole week. We felt your presence amongst us through the visitors and those who are presented. We ask you to be with us this afternoon to open our ears and hearts to your Spirit working in our lives, and bringing us to new directions, new awareness to issues around the world. We pray this as all things through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, it really is a pleasure to be here. Although I forgot to announce, don't leave afterwards, because we're taking a picture. We want a picture. So please don't leave. So our theme this week has been, Quo Vadis, where are we going? Where are you going? And I'm just using that as a beginning today to say, where am I going today? I'm going to really cover two topics. One is kind of a follow-up from the last couple of years, and then I'm going to branch into a new topic for us here in Kennebunk. And the old topic is, I usually give an update on Rome, what's going on, the gossip of Rome, type of thing. So I've been out of Rome for a year now, and I do miss it. By the way, I miss living in Rome. But our talks the last 2 years have always had a big piece of, well, who's going to be the next pope? Do you remember the names that we threw around? So I have to report how well we did. Or we didn't. So we know that there was a conclave. These are not the actors in the conclave. There were different actors in the conclave. So April 21st, Pope Francis, on Easter Sunday morning, early in the morning, around 7 o'clock, they announced that he passed away after a lengthy illness, actually a number of months. I'm convinced, and I hear from some sisters who are a little bit more in the know than I am convinced that he was sent home from the hospital as a hospice patient, and that he knew his time was very limited. And that's why he forced himself to go out Easter Sunday morning to be with the crowds. That he knew this was the end coming, which is pretty powerful for someone to feel that way and to force themselves out that way. So he died on Monday, April 21st. His funeral was on that Saturday. I was actually in Assisi with 40 high school students when we got the word that he passed away, and I was in Rome for his funeral at the time of his funeral. And we always talk about the Romans, that they don't know how to put anything together. They're crazy. They're not very organized. They put, in 1 week, they put together a funeral for a pope with guests and VIPs from all over the world. It was remarkable to see, and remarkable to see the turnout. So then soon after that, about 10 days after that, on May 7th, the conclave starts. The first day of the conclave, 133 cardinals come. All from the world except 133 electing cardinals. There are cardinals over the age of 80 cannot vote. So there were some of those there, but they can't go into the conclave. So it's a little age discrimination, I think. But, when we're electing sometimes popes that are 80 years old, why can't an 80-year-old vote? But 2 did not show up because of health. 1 was from Spain, and the second one was from, I forget from where. from another country. There were two individual cardinals who were ill and could not come. And so what we do is we wait, and after 4 votes, Rome is full and everybody is watching. The white smoke comes on the 8th, the second day, Thursday, May 8th. And then all the speculation, everyone is waiting. You know, who is it? Who was there? Who was elected? These were the names that we were throwing around. You remember? Then we found out somebody comes out, and it's kind of shocked everyone. But then I was thinking about, God, so close. They said, American born. Wow. Bachelor's degree in mathematics. Wow. Part of a religion community, but not a Jesuit. Wow. It's looking good. It's really looking good. Studied at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago in the 80s. It's really looking good. Recently worked in Rome. We're watching. Someone's going to be revealed. It was feeling that good. It was feeling that good. But then they announced he was a White Sox fan, and I knew I was finished. Did you ever feel that you're that close to something? So how did we end up with Pope Jonas the 14th, I'm sorry, taking the name of Pope Leo III, from Leo XIII. Well, there's all kinds of stories out there already, and it's kind of fun listening to them. The pre-conclave meetings that the cardinals always have, so from the time of the funeral to the time of the conclave, they have 10 days to talk. And you try to find out where they're meeting, like what coffee shop, and you want the table next to them and stuff like that. And it was actually came out that Cardinal Dolan from New York was actually quite a kingmaker, that he actually recommended Prevost when Francis was elected. Which is pretty amazing. And that he was already talking him up before the press was even putting him. He was on one list here or there, far down the list, but he really wasn't on any significant list. But so Dolan was considered to be kind of a kingmaker. Also, he was getting, before the conclave, he had, of course, being from Peru, having been 20 years in Peru, he was kind of got the support of the South Americans almost from the beginning. He also had the support of the cardinals from the Roman Curia, so the Rome office, the Vatican, who were voting because he worked there. And he was also getting the support of the non-Taglia Asians. If you remember, Cardinal Antonio Taglia was a rising star. Everybody thought he was going to be the next pope. But the story goes that the Asians were split, and the non-Taglia cardinals were in the early part looking at Prevost as a possible nominee. But by May 7th, in the afternoon, they had their first vote. And the stories coming out is that Parolin had between 40 and 50 votes. Now, out of 133, you needed 89. There's also a story out that Prevost had more than 50 already in the first vote. But we got black smoke. Then the next day comes Thursday the 8th, and there's one vote in the morning. And it said that Parolin basically kept a steady number. He didn't really gain any, but kept a steady number. But in the meantime, because of people like Dolan, all of a sudden the US Cardinals, the UK Cardinals, the Australian Cardinals, cardinals from India and from South Africa. All the English-speaking countries are all English-speaking countries. So it makes sense that there was an English-speaking cardinal kind of promoting something. And for obvious reasons, he was being seen as not a left, not a right, but a real middle-of-the-roader. He was seen as a bridge builder. And that's the way they were talking about him. But the second vote happened on the 8th in the morning, and we got black smoke. Now, this is where the story then in the afternoon on the 8th goes a little bit crazy, because there was a vote, first early part of the afternoon, and people have spoken about it that Prevost actually had the 89 votes, but there was no smoke. That for some reason there was a second vote in the afternoon, and that the Prevost had over 100 votes, and that's when we got the white smoke. So interesting gossip about Prevost. The question now is, do we think he's going to be a MAGA in U.S. terms or a woke? And then that's still, the jury is out. Really, the jury is out. He's getting ready to put out an encyclical, and we'll see something when that comes out. But he's very patient. He's cautious. He's waiting. He's very intelligent. He listens to a lot of people, apparently. And it'll be interesting to see which direction he goes. But everyone has an opinion, though. First of all, everyone is claiming, because he's an American, somehow they have a connection. His last year at Catholic Theological Union was my first year. So we did cross. But frankly, I don't remember him, and I don't think he remembers me. Though I did hang out at the Augustinian house. We did things. They were a couple blocks away from us in Chicago. And so we did things together. So I'm sure our paths crossed, but he and I both look different than what we did in the 80s. And so it's hard to say whether we really, I don't think we knew each other, but our paths probably crossed. I was in San Diego when he was elected. I was for a meeting in San Diego and sitting with Monsignor Michelanis. And we got a call from a bishop friend of his, who's now retired in Philadelphia, Bishop Green, Archbishop Green, who was a nuncio. And he called almost immediately and said, "This is good for the church and it's good for me." And we were like, okay, let's hear why. Archbishop Green was the nuncio of Peru, who recommended Prevost to be made a bishop, and he consecrated him a bishop. So without Archbishop Green, we wouldn't have Bishop Prevost, who became Cardinal Prevost, who is now the Pope. So I guess it was good for him. So now I know who to call if I'm trying to get in and have lunch with the Pope. Because my CTU connection will not get me there. So just some things that we know from his previous writings about immigration. He opposed the separation of families openly. A lot of this is from his TikTok and Instagram and things like that. He clashed with J.D. Vance on the issue of compassion. J.D. Vance said that compassion in immigration is first for the citizens. And he actually clashed with him, rightfully so, with that. On racism, he expressed sympathy at the death of George Floyd, expressed sympathy to the family. He also challenged the bishops that they're not speaking up enough against racism. He openly challenged the bishops. On gun control in 2017, he supported gun control. On the environment, he expressed alarm when the U.S. was not meeting its carbon emission goals in 2017. He supported COVID vaccines, and he was pushing that vaccines would be made available for all people, not just specific. He's a big pro-life supporter, so right away, those first areas you would say, he's leaning to the left, but then he's a strong pro-life person. In terms of human sexuality, he supports strongly traditional church teachings about marriage and sexuality. About nuclear arms, he supports a ban, and he believes that deterrence is an illusion. And he shows the examples in the world that powers have nuclear arms, and still the bad guys are trying to get them. So deterrence of possession of weapons, nuclear weapons, is an illusion. So how would you say, what is he? Is he MAGA? Is he woke? Is he left? Is he right? One writer said, he's Catholic. He goes by Catholic values. He's not political at all. Doesn't try to be, never was in Peru. Before he went to Peru, he never was. But that he is a patient, thoughtful Catholic. And so we wait now to see how his experience, especially from Peru, shape his future papacy. That's it for the report from Rome. Any quick questions on that?
The Augustinians get along with the Francis.
Actually, the Augustinians get along very well. I work pretty closely with Augustinians in San Diego, and they've already let everybody know that while before he was a bishop, he taught some classes at the Augustinian High School in San Diego. So it's one of theirs. Within a week after he was elected Pope, he was the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. The teachers, all of them are retired now, are on their YouTube and everything. I taught the Pope. I taught the Pope. We have a Pope from our school and stuff like come to our school and you might be Pope too. Well, I was there and look at me, I'm in Kennebuck. So, yes.
They're also highlighting his house, which was his former house, which was for sale, but that's a different story. The previous Pope was trying to do like financial reforms and everything. Are there indications that the deal is going to try to see?
Actually, he has spoken about it, but he has not named, I haven't heard that he has named any people for it. But apparently that is high on his agenda. He has spoken about the need for further reform. Pope Francis had made some pretty good strides with the help of the change of the financial situation in Italy with the EU, which forced the Vatican also to change their financial structures. So they've been moving along very slowly, but the sense is that he is in tune with the need for that. Yes.
Getting rid of certain titles.
Yeah. Okay. If you see something on YouTube, for number one, I would recommend you not watch it, because most of it says, if you look further down, it says this is created by AI. It is not truthful. And so they're creating these images that he's not getting along with Cardinal Taglia, and there's other cardinals and Cardinal Burke and all this. That's trash. It's nonsense. Please don't get hung up in that, because it creates a picture of the Holy Father and of the Church that isn't good. Yes.
There was also a YouTube of him playing guitar quite well. Does he play guitar?
To be honest with you, somebody else told me that. I've never seen him play the guitar.
Okay.
So even I don't remember at the Augustinian house anyone playing the guitar. But doesn't mean he doesn't. He never saw me play the accordion either. So
South America is very, very lightweight.
it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I can't hear you.
Where does he stand on women's rights in the church?
From what we know, his work in Peru, he was very much in support of women's roles in the diocese, in the church. How that's going to translate to the papacy, we have to wait and see. But when you think about South America, my experience with the friars in South America, when we go to their offices and stuff, they have no women working with them, especially in their finance offices. They're like 50 years behind everyone else. They say that he had a mix of male, female, lay, religious, ordained, working in the offices in Peru. So we'll see what happens. I haven't seen anything definitive, but okay. So that's the report from Rome. Thank you, Leo. I like my previous picture better.
We agree.
Then you could all come for lunch. So here we are. I am currently, as of last October, I was named the president of the Franciscan Foundation for the Holy Land. It's a foundation that was started 30 years ago here in the United States by a friar living in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is a custody of friars. I'll tell you a little bit as I go through my presentation. They have about 200 friars in their custody. They're a group in the Holy Land, plus 100 friars like myself in service of the Holy Land. So I am now in service of the Holy Land with this foundation. Like I said, it's a 501c3 here in the United States, but it was being run by a friar in Jerusalem. I have set up an office in Washington for a couple of reasons, because I think we need to work on the foundation here in the United States. And also, it's very difficult to get in and out of Jerusalem. Most of our donors are former pilgrims, and the foundation hasn't had a pilgrimage in 5 years. 3 years because of COVID, 2 years because of the current conflict. So 5 years, our thing is drying up, so we need to do some different work here. So I'm reorganizing the foundation here in the States, and I live in Washington. Those of you who aren't familiar with Washington, there's a Franciscan monastery for the Holy Land. As if you've ever been there, it has all the shrines of the Holy Land replicated there. So you could come there and you don't have to travel to Jerusalem, but you come to Washington, D.C. and experience the shrines of the Holy Land. I was talking with some people here that maybe we should plan like a Lithuanian day in Washington, go to the National Shrine, celebrate Mass at the Lithuanian altar, and it's right near really the Franciscan monastery. So we could come and have lunch or something, see the shrine. So you may see something in the future. And my talk this afternoon is on the Christian presence in the Holy Land, and I title it Hope in the Presence of Suffering, actually very great suffering. To get us in the mindset, I don't know if you recognize this place. It's Lambeau Field, Green Bay, Wisconsin, of the Green Bay Packers. If you look in this picture over here to the left, right about the middle, behind the Packers bench, about 12 rows up, seat 51, I'm sitting there. The Friars had tickets, we still do have 9 season tickets for the Packers because our headquarters was right up there in the Green Bay area. But why do I start off with Lambeau Field? It was 1998. The Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay on the Sunday of Thanksgiving Day weekend. So my brothers, cousins, and my brother-in-law, and I think that's about 10 of them, celebrated Thanksgiving dinner with their families on Thursday, and Friday they all drove out from Philadelphia to Green Bay. I had to find them. Well, they stayed at a hotel, but find them people to visit with and things like that. Had to get enough tickets for everyone, and we went to the game. We were the first ones there into the lot to tailgate, and when the street sweeper came back the second time at the end of the game, we decided we should probably leave. We were second to the last to leave. But we walked into the game, and my brother-in-law, Ed, who was I think Baptist by family. I don't even know if he was ever baptized. He's deceased now, but he was a Baptist, and, I wouldn't say he has very strong faith in anything. He walks in, and he was with me at the 50-yard line because I had 2 seats at the 50-yard line. He stands there. He was a big guy, and he stands there, and he says, "Oh, the Mecca." That's the most faithful thing I ever heard out of his mouth. But he recognized the importance of that space. Lambeau Field. We have spaces that are important also in our own lives. Where you met your future spouse might be an important space. Where you had your first kiss. Your first job, your first house, places that are important, places where things happen for you. Maybe even a cemetery where our family and friends are. We call this the spirituality of space or place. There's something happens there. There's something important. So when we talk about the Holy Land, we can understand the spirituality of place. The Holy Land, after all, is where Jesus walked, where Jesus preached, where he taught, where he healed, where he suffered, where he died, from where he rose, the Holy Lands. But the place is also holy for other people, like the Jews who've been in that region as far back as the 11th century BC in some form or another. So the spirituality, the holiness of space and place makes the Holy Land a particular important place for us people of faith. The Holy Land includes not only Israel, which is about the size of New Jersey. Now within that, you also have the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But it also includes Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Cyprus. That's all. When we talk about the Holy Land, it includes all these territories that now we divide with different lines. The friars have been in the Holy Land since 1217. Francis sent some friars there, and there's stories of friars going there, and then their bodies come back, and their bodies being brought back from the Holy Land actually inspired people like St. Anthony of Padua to join us, because he wanted to be like that also, dead. Apparently that attracted people. Francis himself was in the Holy Land, 1219, 1220. The friars have been in the Holy Land actually since that time. Many other religions eventually came into and out of the Holy Land, but they mostly in the Jerusalem area, things like that. But it was a dangerous place, and so many of them left. When the Muslim influence came back, a lot of the other Christians and Catholics and Christians pulled out. So the friars were the only ones there. So it was the Queen and the King of Naples who basically worked with the Holy Father, the Pope, to make sure that the friars are given custody of the holy shrines, the Christian places. And people think, wow, they must have thought great of the friars. No, everyone else left. They were afraid to die. But the friars were hanging in there. We're going to stay there. And so we got custody, which is why we call that, instead of, I belong to a province, we call that a custody. Also, their head, the custos, is appointed through the Vatican. We elect our own provincial, they appoint. So the friars have had a great history there, a great ministry there. They were there practically by themselves until the middle of the 19th century. And a lot of it had to do with the difficulties in the area, that people just weren't coming to the Holy Land. So we have a pretty long history in the Holy Land. So what do we do in the Holy Land? Well, our first primary ministry is care for the shrines. Take care of the shrines, because the pilgrims come to the shrines. So somebody's got to take care of it. But we also want to protect them from being destroyed, from being taken over, run over. There's also Christians in the Holy Land. We'll talk a lot about them. So our ministry is to the Christian community, not just those who are popping in for a week or 10 days, but for the Christian community that is living there. And all of this falls under what we call a general theme of the mission of the foundation and the mission of the custody is to sustain the Christian presence in the Holy Land. For without Christians, these holy shrines become merely museums. So we want to have what we call living stones. Our struggle is to keep Christians in the Holy Land, to keep living stones in the Holy Land. The Holy Land is the place of Jesus, the place of the friars. You would expect it to be a very peaceful place. But we all know it just doesn't work that way. There have been numerous accords and agreements. Many of them just fall apart. I was reading somebody was talking about some of these peace accords and why they fell apart. And they say, because even though the leaders and the politicians come up with an agreement that seems to make sense, the people cannot internalize the idea of peace in the Holy Land. That's a sad statement. But I'm beginning to believe that's very true. No matter what they try to do, it's hard to really make this happen. Into the peace that they really need. There are different levels or different layers of the conflict. One is a religious cultural conflict. When we think of Jerusalem, Jerusalem is a divided city, partly because the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians have their main temple, main church there. For us, that's where Jesus died, rose. So here's a map of Jerusalem, and a map that shows the different divisions. If you look in the blue division is, the yellowish division is the Christian division. The one below it is the Armenian division. The upper region is the Muslim, and the green region is Jewish region. So you have the Dome of the Rock, which is the Muslim place where Muhammad went up to heaven from. So that's important to them. In the green section along the right-hand side, you have the wall, the remaining wall of the first temple. That's all the Wailing Wall that we always see. And in the yellow section, you see right kind of a little bit central, a little bit to the right of the center is the Holy Sepulchre, the place where Jesus died and burned, the Holy Sepulchre, and rose from the dead. So we have a divided city, which reflects this conflict that these three religions are trying to use the same space. If that weren't problem enough, what I consider even a greater problem is the Christian conflict. So we have this Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which includes Golgotha and the tomb of Jesus, all within this complex that is the Holy Sepulchre, built by, in the time of Constantine, commissioned by Helena, Constantine's mother, 4th century. It's been there ever since. But who's managing it? Well, you have the Latin, the Roman Catholics, often called the Latin Catholics, the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Apostolics, the Coptics, the Syriacs, and the Ethiopian Orthodox. And they can't get their act together. If you don't show up on your allotted slot, you'll lose it. If you move a candle without permission, you'll get yelled at. They'll write you up. I was there before Christmas, and I was invited to celebrate Mass at the tomb of Jesus. My first time ordained 30 plus years, I got to celebrate Mass at the tomb of Jesus, which is a very small altar and a little larger space outside. By the altar, you could fit 2, maybe 3 people. Outside, you maybe have 10 other people. So here we are at Mass. I was moved, even though it was 5 o'clock in the morning, because that was the slot. I was deeply moved to be there. So I intoned an Alleluia at the time of the Alleluia, and I sang the Lamb of God and Amen, the doxology at the end of the Eucharistic prayer. And I walked out, and one of the other priests, some other guy, came up to me and says, "You're not allowed to sing in the Holy Sepulchre." It wouldn't go well with last night's talk. But that's a rule. Only for the major liturgies can you sing, and not inside the sepulchre. Outside. So, and they fight over this. How can we be preaching peace if we can't even have peace inside the holiest place that we have amongst ourselves? It amazes me, and it saddens me. The conflict that we're most aware of is the political conflict, and that is one that goes back, it could go back a couple hundred years, but it's most recent within the last 100 years, 150 years, is that between Israel and Palestine. This is the real conflict. It's a conflict that is reflected in history from the biblical time of the Old Testament, when the Jews were sent out of the Holy Land, out of their place, and sent to Egypt. And there was and Babylonia. They're always sent out to exile, and they're always coming home. And then we have the time of during the Second World War, the Holocaust, when the Jews were being, throughout Europe, being punished and being killed, and they're trying to come back to the Holy Land, and a lot of them do come back because it's their safe place. But we also have the Palestinians who have the territory and don't have the territory, and there's a whole history there. But here's a telling map. This is Israel, sides of New Jersey. The first is 1947. There's a whole history there. I don't want to get into all the details of it, but 1947, so the end of the Second World War. This is after the Muslims were in there in the 1500s, and then the Ottomans came in the 1800s, and then the French and the British divvied up the land, and now they're giving it to Palestinians, the Palestine. So most of what is now Israel was Palestine in 1947. But then the blessings of the French and the British, after they partitioned the land in 47, and they leave basically what you could say Gaza, the little strip, the West Bank, which includes Bethlehem, Nazareth, Sea of Galilee, the Golan Heights, that little piece. This is what exists then. And this time also, 10, 15 years later, Egypt recognizes the border of Israel, and everything seems to be falling into place. It isn't that easy. We have all these peace agreements, this continuing fighting, and so, the 6-Day War, it just goes one thing after another. So by the end of 1967, we have the third map, which is really what we've come into now, at least we think we have, where you have Israel is the blue, and you have the green is the large piece is the West Bank, which includes Jerusalem in the little corner as part of that, and then also places like Nazareth and Bethlehem. The little strip there in the top, in the middle is Gaza, the Gaza Strip. We think that'd be okay. But it continues to be a fight over land. That's what it is. The first conflict is a fight over religions. The second conflict is a fight over religion. The third conflict is a fight over social society and land. And what's happened is the settlers, which are an extreme right wing of Jewish people, who believe all of Israel belongs to them. And for the most part, the government backs their movements. And they'll just walk into a Palestinian town and say, get out, this is ours. So this is what was happening up until 2021. That's the latest map. It's even less green today because that movement of settlers has continued. That's the fight. That's the fight over land between the Palestinians and the Israelis. This, of course, peaked in October of 23, October 7th, when, to understand the history, after 1967, the PLO was recognized as the organization that is going to manage the Palestinian lands. But it was still, a lot of it was being controlled. Borders being controlled. The flow of electricity, flow of water, flow of food was being controlled by Israel. And so the PLO was being seen as a weak leader, a weak administrator. And so by October of 23, actually before that, the people of Palestine, when they got to elect the government, they needed a change. And Hamas was promising a change. We will fight for you. We will stick up for you. So the people voted in Hamas. You can't deny that. Unfortunately, Hamas was using national resources, international resources that they were receiving, and they were holding them for themselves or selling them and buying weapons and building tunnels and things like that. By October 23, it peaked. They were ready to take back their territories. And that's what led to crossing the border and what we know as the war in Gaza. What happened on that day, October 7th of 2023? 1,200 Jews were killed in the crossing of the border, 250, around 250, 248, 251. The number's always unclear. About 250 were taken hostage. Israel begins to fight to get their hostages back. And the war just continues to escalate, one thing after another. To date, about 60,000 Palestinians have been killed. About 20,000 of them probably militants. 40,000 innocent children, women, elderly. That's pretty sad. And it goes on. What everyone understands is that the military action could end today. But the conflict that is behind the military action is going to take a lot longer. There needs to be some people to step away from the history of what has happened in order to create something new in that whole region. The current leadership on both sides is not willing to talk about that. It's just so obvious. So that's the political side of the story. This affects us, the Christians, because this affects our lands, our shrines, our holy places, our sacred ground. How do we talk about the spirituality of a place with this war going on and the uncertainty of being able to go to Bethlehem or Nazareth, or the danger of being in Jerusalem by the Holy Sepulchre? Yeah, just another thing about Gaza. I was on the border of Gaza my last visit, and we're about 40 miles away from Gaza where we stay. We don't, the rocket alarms go off, but we don't see the rockets. They just go off. The friars don't do anything. I came out of my room one morning, 4 o'clock, the alarm goes off, it's on my phone. I come out, I look, there's no one around. In the morning, I asked one of the older friars sitting at breakfast, I said, "Brother, the alarm went off last night." "Yeah. Is there anywhere I should go? Like a fallout shelter?" And he says, "Oh, Father, don't worry about it. If they get close enough, we'll come and get you." I said, "Brother, if they get that close, you ain't going to find me. I'm an American. I'm out of here." So all of this does affect the Christian presence. Just some rough numbers. If we look at Israel itself, in 1920, about 10% of the population of the area, remember at this time it was mostly Palestinian area, 10% of it was Christian. By 2019, less than 2% of the population was Christian in Israel, less than 2%. Now we're below 1.5%. The Christians are fleeing. In Bethlehem, the birth of Christ. This is our nativity. This is where it happens. In 1920, 85% of Bethlehem was Christian. 85%. Today, less than 10%. I have a number on that too. About 3,000 Christians in Bethlehem today. Many of them elderly. Gaza, the Gaza Strip. In 2007, there were about 1,000 Christians. Today, there are less than 500 Christians, maybe 135 Latin or Roman Catholics, 135 left. There's a parish there that Pope Francis used to call the pastor, he said, every night to see how things are going. That parish was recently rocked in the Holy Family Church. A number of people were killed. It's also the parish where snipers killed a mother and a daughter about a year ago, more than a year ago. It's not good for the Christians. The auxiliary bishop emeritus, a retired Marcuso, I think he might have just passed away, I heard, would say, we don't have financial, material, nor military power to justify, to ask the Christians to remain. We only have the moral power to ask them to remain where they belong. To be a citizen of the land of Jesus is not a historical accident. It's a vocation. It's a mission. It's an amazing thing to say. So what are we to do with this? How are we to respond to this? I used these two images actually from Pope Francis, because this is 2025, the Jubilee, called the Jubilee for the Pilgrims of Hope. And this image that Francis was commissioned, Pope Francis commissioned, includes these four people, different colors, saying that the whole world, we all have to work in together. And the only way we get there, even though the seas are stormy, you see the waves underneath, the cross, it's not failing. The cross is flexible for Pope Francis. But yet it's anchored. Where did he get this theme and this image? He actually got this from this 1938 picture. It is by a man by the name of Marc Chagall, called The White Crucifixion, 1938. And it's really, I think, it caught my eye because of one thing. It's in 1938, the Kristallnacht has ended. The Jews were, their properties were destroyed. It was right after the Kristallnacht that this came out. And so it's all about the Jewish struggle. There's a lot of turmoil there. It's all about the Jews running, their temple being destroyed, their houses being destroyed, their businesses being destroyed. And in the midst of that is the cross of Jesus Christ. Up until this time, the cross of Jesus Christ for the Jew is an image of oppression. And here it's something else. That in the midst of all their suffering, Chagall is saying, in the midst of all their suffering, Christ on the cross exists. This is why Christians belong in the Holy Land. In the midst of suffering, Christ is there. Christ is present. Now, are you looking at that image carefully? Do you see something remarkable in that image? Chagall was from Belarus. He did his work in Russia and in France. But there's something interesting. I don't know if you can see it clearly. Let me see if I got it. Oh. You see this? Oh, okay. The Lithuanian flag. That's what caught my eye. So if Christ belongs in the midst of that suffering, is that where we belong to? The Lithuanian people too have suffered. I just found it amazing. I tried to find why he put the Lithuanian flag there. I can't find it anywhere, but it's there. If you were to ask the Christians today in Israel, throughout the Holy Land, and even here in the United States, where do we stand in the midst of that suffering? Some are very pro-Israel. Some Christians in the Holy Land believe Christians should integrate into the Israeli society. They're pro-Israel. They try to partner and work with them. There's a real nationalism there. Other Christians are very pro-Palestinian. They believe that Palestine should have self-determination, that the people should be free, they should have their land. As much as the Jewish people say this land is really all of ours, given to us through the Old Testament and everything, but Palestinians go back to the time when the Muslims first came in the 1500s, and then up to 1947, they say, no, this was our land, and people change, people move, and so you can't come back and fight us for it, it's our land. And there are a lot of Christians who believe that, want to stick with the pro-Palestinians. There are those also who believe that you stay with Israel because that is the military supremacy party. They're going to have military supremacy. I believe that's the American model. I don't think our government is pro-Israel. I just believe they choose Israel because they believe Israel is the best military power for that region. I just firmly believe that. And I think that's what's supported by the Israeli lobby in Washington. If you read the books about it, it's amazing. But if we are this cross in the midst of the suffering, we need to be something else. We need to believe in human dignity for all people. We need to recognize that all people have suffered, that all people have been victimized, and this cycle has to be broken. That's what hope is all about. That's what Pope Francis was with his image for the Pilgrims of Hope for the Holy Year, 2025. That's why he used that image from Chagall. Because hope is about breaking that cycle. That's why I want the Holy Land. I believe in that. Our presence is one of hope. There's no other way to look at it. So how can we do this? Number one, well, three things: prayer, greater awareness, and support. And don't worry, I'm not taking up a collection. We ask you, as friars from the Holy Land, that you pray for peace in the Holy Land, always. That you pray for all peoples of the Holy Land. Not just for the side that you think is correct, because they're both wrong. They're both correct, too, in things, but they're both wrong. So we pray for peace amongst all peoples. And I ask you to pray for the mission of the friars. We have some friars, especially in Syria and Lebanon, who suffered greatly. We have friars in Gaza who won't leave. We have 2 friars in Syria who won't leave no matter what goes on in Syria. And we have friars throughout Jerusalem and throughout Israel who are in the face of rockets. We have had a couple of our churches, rockets not bomb the church, but cause damage near a church enough to damage the place where the friars are living or where the church is. So pray for the friars in our mission. I think the greatest thing that we can do, and this is one of the reasons I have asked to open up the office in Washington, is to educate, to bring a greater awareness to what is really happening in the Holy Land, to what is happening to Christians in the Holy Land. And that awareness is highlighted for me by these 2 faces. Hirsch is the young man. Hirsch's last name is Goldberg. He has actually 2 names, Hirsch, Goldberg, Pollen. Joint citizen, Israel and United States. The woman in the picture is his mother, Rachel. Hirsch was at the music festival on October 7th of 2023. He was with friends, some people. They found a cave when the Palestinians came, when Hamas came across the border. They got a hold of they were in this cave, and the Palestinians who attacked were throwing grenades into the cave, and he was at the door throwing them back out. One didn't get out, blew off his arm. You would think he'd be left for dead. No, they came in and took them all hostage. There are pictures of him in the news being taken hostage without his arm. He survived for 11 months. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, located him. They were about to rescue him, and they shot him. His captors shot him. His mother, before he was found 11 months into the captivity, his mother began a big movement. Again, these are Americans. Both of them are Americans, dual citizenship. His mother was one of the founders of Parents for the Release of the Captives. She was a strong voice, oftentimes a block away from our friary and just outside of the old town of Jerusalem. She was always there speaking, we need to get our hostages out, we need to get our hostages out. Her son was killed. We thought, well, somebody else will take over that role. She keeps showing up. But her message is, haven't we all suffered enough? It's time for us to look at the humanity of people and get over the history that has brought us here. The most powerful thing she says, haven't we all suffered enough? This is the awareness that we need sometimes. This is the awareness that they need too. And they have a hard time letting go and capturing that. The other third thing we can do is support. Support in various ways the work of the friars and others in the Holy Land, especially those that are trying to support the Christians. How do we do this support of the Christians? Much of our work with the foundation has emergency relief where needed. So we've supported soup kitchens and getting food to people when we can. Gaza is impossible. One of the big things we do is education. We give out scholarships. Again, to keep Christians in the Holy Land. They must be educated in the Holy Land, and they must commit after their degree is complete that they will spend 6 years in the Holy Land working. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have dentists who have finished our programs of scholarships. So that's a big program. We have a number of schools. So we support schools from kindergarten up through high school. The foundation doesn't have a direct college that we support. We support scholarships at different colleges in the Holy Land. But it's amazing when you talk to these young people who are given a chance. These Christians who we're trying to keep in the Holy Land. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. 76% of the Christians in the Holy Land are Palestinians. Too often when you say that, you're supporting the terrorist. That makes it difficult. Not all Palestinians are terrorists. There's a very small amount of them. Have a lot of them been forced to be angry? Listening to last night's talk, I talk about music will make people angry, and so I think just the environment is making them angry. But they're not all terrorists. We support the schools. We have another thing we have is Magnificat, which is a music school. You go there and there's Palestinians, there's Muslims, Jews, and Christians, kids studying in the school. We have a school for the blind. Palestinians, Christians, Jews, Arabs, Muslims, kids studying. When I was there before Christmas, I went and the children had just come back from giving a concert to the Pope. So they gave the concert 1 week to the Pope, and the second week they gave it to me. That close. And I said, wow, this is remarkable. Look how well they work together. Look how well they live together. I said, boy, we must be making inroads. He said, unfortunately, they go home. They go home to their houses, to their families. And the hate is so deep that it takes just that much longer to make it work. Here's why I'm working with the Holy Land. In April a year ago, 180 Palestinian children from Gaza, 180. Almost all of them were orphaned. Many of them were missing limbs or seriously injured. They all needed some sort of medical, psychological help. The foundation got 180 of these kids out of Gaza, through Egypt, to Italy, to foster families at the hospitals. One friar connected with the foundation, Father Ibrahim, an Egyptian. I asked him, I said, how did you do this? It's impossible. Well, he's an Egyptian and has very good relationships with the Egyptian government. So they were able to get him from Gaza to Egypt. That passageway was open still. He's also was very connected with the Holy Father and with friars in northern Italy. So he had that connection taken care of. I said, fine, that's the easy part. These are your friends. You had to get them out of Gaza. And he said, do you remember 2002? Bethlehem. If you remember 2002 Bethlehem, there was a siege upon our church and monastery in Bethlehem, where the Palestinian Christians, some of them being accused of being terrorists, were being rounded up by the Israeli Defense Forces. And they came for refuge in our monastery and church in Bethlehem. They were there for 68 days, I think it was, something like that. Not being given food, not being able to get out. The IDF came and told the friars, you are free to leave. We're not after you. Father Ibrahim said, I will stay with my people. In that group, a number of those young people are now older, 20 years, and they're connected with Hamas. He said, I have their phone numbers in my cell phone. One guy makes it possible because he has a connection with people who can't themselves sit down and talk things out. One guy saves 180 kids. That's why I'm working with the foundation. This is what we have to do. This is who we honor. This is a people that needs our help. They are suffering. Israelis are suffering too. One thing you don't see in the press here, almost every weekend, Jews in Israel are protesting by Terra Santa, our college, against the government actions in Gaza and the West Bank, almost every weekend. We don't see that in our press. Awareness. Don't take sides. How can you be supportive? Some of you, if you may know in your parish, is the Good Friday collection. It's a collection that's taken up from around the world, and it splits us. The friars get 60% of it for our mission, and the Latin Patriarch, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, we thought was going to be Pope last year, he gets 40%. He's the Latin Patriarch. So you can support the Latin Patriarch also through things like the Equestrian Order of the Holy Land. The foundation, which is what I'm with, that's Father Peter, the founder of the foundation. He's 82 years old. He doesn't look 82, even in that picture. That's not that old of a picture. But he's supposedly, operative word supposedly, retired. We're working through that. But here's the other way. How can you support the work of the Holy Land? Become a pilgrim if you haven't been there. Go to the land of Jesus. See the people. Visit the shrines. Become part of the living stones. Be a pilgrim. We're looking to put together a pilgrimage probably in March. Right now is what we're aiming for. It's very tricky yet, but we're working out the plans. My final thought before I take a couple of questions. It's time for everyone, those in the midst of the conflict and us on our periphery, to identify not with one side or the other, but to identify with the land of which we are temporary occupants, called simply to be stewards, the living stones that care for the stories that are our faith story. In the land where Jesus walked, we are called to be the pilgrims. Acho, amen. So, a couple questions. Yes, Jonas.
Father, Earlier.
Wait, let's get a microphone. Just wait out. Everyone can hear.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. You good commercial.
Okay. Earlier in your talk, you made the insightful comment that the U.S. basically supports Israel versus the others in the area, and you said because it's like the strongest military here. I was wondering if you might have an insight as to why the government of Lithuania supports Israel so much compared to the others. Is it because they just latch onto the coattails of the U.S. and everything?
You answered my question. You answered the question the way I was going to answer. I really believe, and I've talked to Archbishop Grushas about this. Partly because I have I've come across a friend who's a rabbi, and he's working with the Jews in Lithuania to acquire back the cemeteries that are built over. It's a big to-do thing. And I tried to get Archbishop Grushas connected with him, and it's become a political thing more than anything else. And so then we started talking about the support of Israel. And we think it's a connection with more of a military connection, but it's also, let's stay friends with the U.S. and keep them as our friends, unfortunately. And it's, if I felt strongly that we were supporting the people of Israel and not the institution of Israel or the military complex of Israel, I would feel a little better about it. But and I'm not, those who know me, I'm no tree hugger, 70s hippie, peace loving, pot smoking person. You know, Pope Leo is Catholic. We need to be Catholic and Christian. And it really is the respect of all people, even the enemy. Well, I don't know which one of the talks was talking about getting slapped. Was it the Beatitudes talk? And I was talking to somebody before about the mechanics of the slap in the face. And this, I think, speaks to all of this. It speaks to a mentality or an awareness. In the Middle Eastern world, to insult somebody is to slap them in the face. But there's a way to do it that is the insult. You slap them with your right hand on the right cheek. Therefore, you slap them with the back of your hand. I do this with teenagers when we talk about this Francis and the Sultan, and I pick out the biggest kid in the class, and it was usually a football player, and I say, hit me. And they're afraid to because they know they'll go to hell. But I say, okay, I'm going to hit you now. And so I just acting it out. That's the insult. That's when you slap. When you turn the left cheek, you give the other cheek, there's no way for them to hit you again. You disarm them. So Jesus is not telling us to be passive. He's telling us to disarm the enemy, disarm the one who struck you. We need people who think about disarming those who have the weapons. I agree with Leo that the nuclear weapons has shown that it's not a deterrent because the bad guy gets them. The good people, the rational people will always make the right decision. But when you get the bad guy player, you have to look at it differently. We need to think something else. So I think it's the military complex. Long answer for a short question. And I knew that you gave me the answer. Oh, no. I must have said something that's going to.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned the brave work of Father Ibrahim, rescuing all Palestinians. My question is this. I know that in the past, there were plenty of Jewish organizations, both in America and even in Israel. Not enough of them. Oh, I'm sorry. There were in the past, there were Jewish organizations, both in America and in Israel, where some of those organizations were working towards Palestinian rights and against the oppression. not enough of them, and now probably there's even fewer of those organizations around, but has there been some sort of ecumenical work between the Christians in the Holy Land and the Jews, who are the ones who aren't extremists, to try to help the Palestinians?
There's quite a bit of ecumenical work, and actually Cardinal Pizzaballa is, people say that he would not have accepted the position of Pope because he's committed to his work in the Holy Land. And he is at the core of putting together other Christian groups and then even ecumenical groups together to work for taking care of. He's been to Gaza a number of times. After the last major rocket attack in Gaza, he went there the next day to be there. And he's trying to get people to see. He also has pretty good respect with the parliament people who are more middle of the road. The problem with the Knesset is that it's being controlled now by a very far right group. A couple of people are just controlling the political scene there. And unfortunately, Netanyahu, who I believe was more middle of the road 10, 15 years ago, I think is being led in that direction and controlled in that direction. Interesting, they just came out that they're going, I get all kinds of press from Jerusalem, but the Knesset came out that they're going to, they want to take over for a short time all of Gaza. They're increasing the military action to go into the area where the last 1 million people in Gaza are living in tents, basically. And other people are saying this is not the way to do this. You don't militarily take over the innocent people who are there. So, and Pierre Batista is organizing groups to speak up against this, to talk to that. But now, I got to tell you, we are, as Christians, we are a minority within a minority. So obviously we're not Jews, and they're the majority. And we're not Arab Muslims. And so we are looked upon by the Arab Muslims and by the Jews a little skeptically at times. There's still a thing where I was walking back before Christmas, I was walking in Jerusalem and looked like an old rabbi. I don't know if it was a rabbi or not. It looked like a rabbi. Walked by and spat on me. And I was like, well, this is gross. You know, we don't do this in humanity, right? I talked to my rabbi friend, who's the one working in Lithuania. He happened to be visiting in Jerusalem, and we went out for ice cream. He likes to go out for ice cream all the time. So he takes me to these Jewish places for ice cream, and we're sitting there. And I told him, I said, what's the story of the spitting on me? He said, that was an ignorant Jew. He said, the spitting is the insult. They're throwing an insult at you because of the Christians who kept saying the Jews killed Christ. So that's what the insult is about. But the idea is they don't spit on you. They spit on the path that you walk. So they're supposed to spit in front of you. So either he was blind, bad aim, or he was an ignorant Jew. So again, it's interesting to hear that because I'm walking around wondering every time I walk by somebody who looks a little bit more right by the way they're dressed, you see that. Am I going to be spat upon again? The only time it happened to me.
So the U.S. gives some $3 billion a year in aid to Israel. And if I recall correctly, a couple years or maybe more years ago, some portion of that aid was tied to stopping settlements. It sounds as though, from what you said earlier, there's a rogue element that really doesn't give a rip, and they're going to do those settlements. And so the Israeli government has no control over them. Is that right?
Right. Actually, it was under Obama. The agreements that Obama made with the signing over of, I don't remember if it was $3 billion, whatever the amount of money was, that the settlers, that process is supposed to stop. And he was trying to use money to stop it as soon as he got out. The IDF, the army, will support the settlers going in. It's really sad when we support a lot of the people that lose their places when they come near our monasteries, wherever they are. And when you hear their stories where they've been there for years and all of a sudden they lose everything, including their animals, the land, the building, the animals, everything they have. They just walk in and take over. And the army is there to protect them. And that has becoming more and more. So that's a program that has to stop. Now, one of the ceasefire agreements that I was reading about had included the West Bank, about these settler programs, that they want to somehow stop this from happening. Well, we'll see where it goes.
Father John, in more peaceful times, I believe the primary mission of the Franciscans in the Holy Land was the protection of the holy sites.
And the pilgrims who were coming to the holy sites. So they were following up after the Crusaders left, because the Crusaders were there to protect the pilgrims. And then the Crusaders left. So then the friars were also doing some of that, which gave rise to this group called the Knights of the Templars too. So all of that is to protect the pilgrims too.
Okay, so how many sites are there? And what are some of the challenges today to protect and maintain them?
We spend just in maintenance on this. I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head how many there are, because there's major ones and there's a lot of smaller ones in small villages. There's places where, Jesus did a miracle here, and that's a holy site. And so there might be a small church here. Right off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many. I could tell you that we spent last year, the friars, not the foundation alone, but the friars spent over $12 million maintaining the sites. $12 million. That's a lot of money. And maintaining the site is just to keep them operational. A lot of the sites, most of the sites that I know of, don't have any kind of entrance fees or things like that. Some of the museums do, and they'll have entrance fees, but the holy sites don't. So the challenge is to, and when you need to do something, it's major. So for example, the foundation just finished doing this is kind of a funny story because it speaks to the struggle that we have at the Holy Sepulchre. So they found out that they wanted to do archaeology under the tomb of Christ, under the Holy Sepulchre. And when they do that, they're going to have to rebuild the floor. So the project was to be, about $20 million, the whole project. Archaeology, bringing archaeologists in. So there's an agreement signed between Christians, which we represented, the Latin Christians, which is the friars represented, because we have friars living there, the Greek Orthodox, and the Armenians. So you take 20,000, you divide that by 3, that's each one's going to pay about 20 million. Each one will pay about 7 million. So the project is just about done. We're waiting to complete it. The foundation, with 8 donors, raised 7 million. 8 donors. The other 2 haven't come up with anything. I thought, we're all in this together. I'm the what do you call it? Naive American who comes in and says, why didn't everyone else pay? Well, that's the way it is. It's the way it is. This is the Holy Land. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I don't know if I'm going to buy into this like this all the time. So just that project is 20 million. I don't know what's going to happen. But is it important? Amazing thing that they found in the archaeology. First time since the 4th century that they dug under the tomb of Christ. They found remnants of a garden. Remember, Jesus was buried in a tomb in a garden. If you've been to the Holy Land, you know the Holy Sepulchre is said to be the tomb of Christ. But so is a place outside of the town of Jerusalem, because the Holy Sepulchre is in the walls of Jerusalem, which would not have a cemetery in the walls, until you realize that the wall at the time of the 1st century was not where it is today. But there's a Protestant group that is promoting this other site as the Holy Sepulchre. It's one of these things like George Washington slept here. There's signs everywhere. Well, so now we have 2 tombs of Christ, because there is a cave there that looks like a skull. And they're saying that must have been the tomb of Christ. Plus, you were in the city, in the town of Jerusalem, and there would never be a garden there. The archaeology discovered through the remnants that are left, I'm trying to think of the word, that there was a garden there. So now we know that this is a really good site for the tomb of Christ. It took us $7 billion to discover that. I think in the long run, it's probably worth it.
And I want to follow up on that. In the pilgrimages that I've been to the Holy Land, I must say when we go to the Franciscan curated or cared for shrines and holy places, I'm so proud to be a Catholic. They are so well kept. They are so beautiful. And in the Holy Sepulchre, you see that the Catholic or the Christian area is supported and cared for. If you go into some of the other little chapels of the Orthodox, they barely have a light bulb. You know, that's it. It's so sad. So bravo to the Franciscans. The shrines are all beautiful. And my second point on the Christians in the West Bank, it's a small percentage, but they run schools that have, the patriarch does, and they have schools that have more Muslims than Christians in them. And I heard that one of the schools was going to be closed because of finances, and the Muslim parents came and begged to keep it open because they said we have very few choices. Our kids either go here or they hear the hate in the other schools. So there are some very fine Muslim families that are appreciative. So there's always hope.
Many of these families are now suffering greatly because their income, they get their livelihood from pilgrims and tourists. But all those shops, many of them are closed or they're open, there's nobody in them. So we're waiting for the tourists and the pilgrims to come back.
Father, thank you for your custodial work in the Holy Land and for all of us and for everyone else around the world. Just two quick questions. Who did this work, the custodial responsibilities, before 1994 when the foundation was established? And then secondly, it seems very powerful when the different religious sects work together. Do you have an analog? Is there a small network where you have a peer in a similar foundational structure in the other faiths that you can do larger projects together, like the example you gave?
So before we were founded, the primary funding for the Holy Land, the mission of the friars, comes from the Good Friday collection. And because that was limited, and then there were certain big projects you couldn't do with that. That's why the foundation, the Custos at the time, Father Nazaro was his name, asked Father Peter, who was an American by birth, but living in the Holy Land, to start the foundation, to focus on larger projects. As they started putting the foundation together, this idea of let's focus on scholarships. So if somebody gives, today is $6,000, pays 1 year, you make a 4-year commitment to send somebody to college for 4 years. And so it's $24,000 you can pay every year or paid in one lump sum. And we began to see that that was having a greater impact to keep the Christians in. So the scholarships became the foundation's primary project, but that's not why it was founded. And so we do supplement a lot of the other work that the Good Friday collection does. And we need to grow the foundation. And I'm seeing areas where the foundation has to grow. What I've begun looking at here now in the States, because I'm based out of Washington, is who else is doing this kind of work? What grant organizations? What other, even if it's ecumenical or something. So we're making some contacts. I'm spending a lot of time going to like the Equestrian Order of Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, to the Knights of the Holy Templar, to the Knights of Malta. All these are, I go to these meetings and I meet people, and they're not all Catholics, and I found out they're not all Christians. So we're trying to create a network. I am not aware in the Holy Land, everyone tends to be very siloed. Everyone works on their own little thing, and it's hard to collaborate. Even where we work and live together, like the Holy Sepulchre, we have this contract of collaboration, and I haven't seen the other 2/3. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So as we're getting into this next question, on the table you may have walked in, I brought some olive wood rosary beads from Bethlehem. These are actually from Bethlehem. They have been blessed, so you can take them and use them to pray for your own needs, but also as you're praying, say a decade or so for the mission of the friars and for the Christian presence in the Holy Lands. So feel free to take them, and I've left some of my cards there if you want those.
Are there also elections and work being done in countries other than the United States?
Oh, yes. The Good Friday collection is worldwide. It's a papal collection, and it's done worldwide, though the two largest contributors are the United States and Canada. Yeah, what Washington, D.C. is, it's called a commissary. So the network is, there's commissaries in many different countries, and the diocese send their funds that they collect in the Good Friday collection to the commissary, and the commissary then forwards them to the Holy Land either through the Congregation of Dicastery for Oriental Churches or through our offices of the custom. So yes, it's a worldwide network. I want to say last year collected over 200 million around the world, something like that.
Well, how much do you,
There's never enough. Right now, I was just talking with we got a new custos, was just appointed. I haven't met him. I was talking with the old custos who I've known for many years, and he's the one who invited me to take this job. And he told me just the custody has $38 million in projects unfunded right now. Some of them started and just stopped because they're not funded. A lot of it is rebuilding schools or building schools, building parish centers so that a parish, for instance, we have a parish center in Nazareth and a parish center in Bethlehem, and so they provide then services to the Palestinian Christians in those areas. But the other thing we've done now a lot of through the parish programs that we have is we have parishioners who are in these parishes who don't have anything to pay their rent or to buy food because there's no work. So we're giving subsidies for family support, and we're doing a lot of emergency support that way. And it really is amazing. It doesn't take much for one family to give them enough just to survive. And so we're able to help quite a few families that way.
I hesitate to speak out, but I do want to, and as kind of not well expressed as it might be, but I do want to ask a couple of questions. I grew up in a neighborhood in Long Island, New York, Great Neck, New York, that had a high percentage of Jewish people, families, and so my friends, my schoolmates, my neighbors, we lived across the street from Rabbi Eckstein and his family, Sharon and Miriam was my best friend. So I do not believe in my heart of hearts that I am anti-Semitic at all. But so question number one, any comment that you can share, how can someone like myself or anybody else express against what we see the state of Israel, the government of Israel doing currently and not be called anti-Semitic? Because in New York, where we still live, very quickly that comes up. So that's one question. The second question is the Jewish people having had perpetrated against them our greatest atrocity. how is it that so many cannot see the suffering that their state now on Gaza's children and families is perpetrating? And I believe you mentioned that there's demonstrations, and we see a little more of that. But I don't know. It doesn't seem, you would think that everybody would recognize very quickly and clearly. And then the third is any commentary on, do the Jewish people not understand that people having their lands and their animals and their, on the settlements taken away from them? And, what's happening in Gaza now, that does not perpetrate in the future a hatred that's so deep that I don't know what you do with that, and that the conflict continues. So it's 3 questions.
I hope I could address them all together or separately. As to the what can we do to avoid being called anti-Semitic in this country or in many countries today right now? We haven't come up with the answer for that. We're doing a lot of, the friars have a whole commission set up of people to try to come up with a way, because what we've realized recently is that our friars, some of the older friars say American friars come and join the custody and they're very pro-Israel. By the time they go back to the States, they are pro-Palestine. And the friars. And right away, they get accused of being anti-Semitic because people equate pro-Palestine with being anti-Semitic. So a lot of it is awareness and education. So what we're trying to do is amongst ourselves, just to have enough dialogue to understand that these labels, these things don't work. There's no solution in these labels. And when we had a meeting about this, I shared a meeting that I had with, I shared a story some years ago here with my first time meeting with Pope Francis. We went in there and we were asking Pope Francis, he was fairly new at being Pope, and we said, so they say you're a communist, or you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. What are you? And Pope Francis said, stop the labels. For once you use a label, you cut off all possibility for dialogue. Get rid of the labels. And so that's the story I share, that we have to stop using even labels of pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. We have to talk about people. We have to talk about dignity of people. So I don't have an answer to that. I know there's people working to try and understand how to do that, because that frightens people in this country, and in a number of other countries too. And it's become a real problem in Italy, that you're being called anti-Semitic right away, because you're speaking, even if you don't say pro-Palestine or Palestinian, if you say you're for all people in Israel, the Holy Land, right away they said, you're against the Jews. No, I didn't say that. And it's just people fall into that trap. Personally, I think the hurt of the Holocaust is so deep, we still haven't gotten through it. I don't want to say get over it, but we haven't gotten through it. There's still too many people carrying that hurt. They feel it's been ignored or denied. And now, I don't think it has, but it didn't affect me directly. But Lithuania was affected by it. So it's a matter of how do we get through that level of hurt that it's just still there. Is it going to take another 3-4 generations? I don't know. By then, Gaza will be gone. It's 90% of Gaza is gone now. I mean, there's a million people that are left are living in tents. They're not living in any building. They're being starved. They're being starved. Kids are being starved. So, but as soon as you say that, you're anti-Semitic. No, I'm not anti-Semitic. I want Israel to succeed. I actually believe in the two-state solution. But the rational people who live there, I can't make it happen. The United States can't do this. We have to facilitate for the people of Israel and for the people of Palestine, the rational people. We facilitate them to do this. I think we have to look in that direction. And so I covered 2 of the questions. Which one did I miss?
the hatred due to the suffering.
So a saying that I've used for years, the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. The opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Both sides are afraid. The people on both sides, they just did a study in Jerusalem of trying to understand the ordinary people on the street. Are Jews in favor of Christians? Are Christians in favor of Jews? And they find that it's about a third of the people, in whichever way you look, are against the other person. So what are you afraid of? You know, they won't say they hate them. They're just not supportive of them. So what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of losing your land? You're afraid of not having money. You're afraid of not having a future. What are you afraid of? We have to get people to talk about their fears. Because otherwise we perpetuate the hate. And if we make it black and white, you love or hate, I think we get caught in that pro-Israel, pro-Palestine trap. And we got to break out of that. Does that help? One more question, I think, okay? Are you ready to say enough?
Are you okay with that?
I just saw one more hand.
I thought maybe we could do it in Washington. You know, you invited us for lunch there to see the shrine.
Yes, we'll work on that. Hey, you know, maybe if the technique I can't be here next year.
August in Washington.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that. I don't know what I was thinking. I must be getting weak.
No, well, we will be here. We don't know how.
We don't know how.
And we're hoping you'll be here for next year's
Yeah,
report.
bring tents. Be like the old days. And also, please don't leave because they're going to take a picture. We want everybody in the picture because we want to advertise how full a Ateitis week is. So please don't leave.
Perfect.
The friars too. You're in the picture. Don't go. We need brown.
So, based on your experience and your knowledge and your acquiring knowledge by the minute, it sounds like in the Holy Land, the countries that have decided to recognize Palestine, some conditionally and some, like Macron, unconditionally, that kind of sounds like it's gonna muddy things from my perspective. I was curious what you were thinking about that.
That was my first when I first heard that, I was like, oh, please, not this way. I think the dialogue, it can't come from here down. We have to facilitate the dialogue from that and the ground up. And when you have a country just coming out and saying, okay, I'm going to go do this, even though the rest of the world is saying this, I think that does muddy the waters. I don't think that's helpful. I think it feeds the conflict. It puts wood on the fire, if not gasoline. And I think I know why they're trying to do it. They're trying to push for a ceasefire, or a ceasefire that'll be a lasting peace. And let's go to ceasefire first. I was talking to somebody, a Jewish person, and I said, why don't we just agree to feed the people? Let's just say we're going to feed the people. We're going to stop this nonsense of blocking the borders and having armies around the food. Let's just feed the people. Let's start there. Bread and butter. No one's asking my opinion over there, so it's.
Hamas won't let them.
They won't. In some areas it's difficult, but not all. Though they're pretty concentrated right now. The people did, if you remember a few months ago, the people tried to rise up. The Palestinian people were rising up against Hamas. Most of the leaders of that thing, most of them were guys in their 20s and 30s. Almost all of them disappeared. They were wiped out. But there was a movement there. The people were rising up saying, we want to take our country back. So yes, Hamas has to be gotten out of the picture, but how do we get there? I don't think bombing innocent people is the way to get there right now. Okay. Thank you very much for having me and listening to me.